They say family is a sanctuary, but mine is a courtroom where I was sentenced to be the failure at 6 years old. Tonight, amidst 30 guests sipping cheap wine. My mother toasted my sister's genius while mocking my job stocking shelves. They laughed, unaware that the battered bag I clutched held a director's offer letter. They have no idea the dumb one just bought the company my sister owes money to. My name is Raina Lockridge. I am 32 years old. And if you looked at the police report from a traffic accident, or a Census Bureau file, or perhaps a tax return, you would see a woman of average height, average build, and average description. But if you asked the woman standing in the doorway of this glass and steel monstrosity in the Silver Lake Hills, she would tell you something very different. She would tell you that Raina Lockridge is a mistake, a smudge on the otherwise pristine portrait of the Lockridge family legacy. I paid the driver of my rideshare taxi and stepped onto the curb. The vehicle was a dented sedan that smelled faintly of pine air freshener and old cigarettes, a stark contrast to the lineup of leased Mercedes and BMWs glistening under the warm amber floodlights of the driveway. I smoothed down the front of my dress. It was black, simple, and severe. My family assumed it was a clearance rack find from a department store basement. In reality, it was a piece of architectural couture from a Japanese designer that cost more than the catering staff was being paid tonight, but they would never know that. To them, I simply looked presentable enough not to be an eyesore. I had barely made it past the oversized potted succulents flanking the entrance when the gatekeeper materialized. Raina, my mother, Sylvia, did not greet people. She inspected them. She stood there in a shimmering champagne gown that was perhaps a bit too tight around the waist, holding a glass of white wine like a weapon. Her eyes scanned me from my sensible heels to my pulled-back hair, searching for a loose thread, a stain, a sign of my inherent clumsiness. "Mother," I said, keeping my voice flat. "You are late," she hissed, stepping closer so the guests mingling in the foyer would not hear. Her perfume was overpowering, a floral scent that always reminded me of funeral homes. "Bianca has been asking for you. Not that she needs you, of course, but it looks bad when the whole family isn't here to support her vision." "Traffic was heavy coming from the city," I lied. Sylvia reached out and aggressively tucked a stray lock of hair behind my ear. Her nails were sharp. "Well, try to blend in. Do not talk about your job. Nobody here wants to hear about pallets or forklifts or whatever it is you do in that warehouse. These are sophisticated people. Raina. Investors, visionaries. Do not embarrass your sister with your blue-collar anecdotes. I will be silent as a grave," I promised. "Good. And for heaven's sake, don't eat too much. The hors d'oeuvres are from Le Petit Jardin, and they cost a fortune. Try not to look like you are starving." She patted my cheek, a gesture that looked affectionate from a distance but felt like a slap up close, and then swirled away to greet a man in a velvet blazer. Her voice instantly switching to a melodic, sycophantic purr. I walked into the belly of the beast. The house was not Bianca's. Of course, it was a short-term rental, staged to look like the home of a successful entrepreneur. The furniture was all white leather and chrome, the kind of things that looked beautiful in photographs but were uncomfortable to sit on. Every surface was covered in displays for Pure Essence, Bianca's new organic cosmetics line. The jars were beautiful, frosted glass with gold lettering. I knew for a fact they were empty. The manufacturer in Ohio had refused to ship the actual product until the invoice for the deposit cleared, which it hadn't. But the illusion held. The room was filled with about 40 people, a mix of family friends, minor local celebrities, and a few unfortunate souls Bianca had cornered at networking events. They were sipping wine and nodding enthusiastically as they examined the empty jars. I made my way to the bar. I needed a drink to survive this. "Chardonnay," the bartender asked. He looked tired. "Please." I watched him pour. The bottle was wrapped in a linen napkin, hiding the label. I knew this trick. Bianca had bought 5 cases of 2-buck chuck from the grocery store and decanted them into crystal carafes, or wrapped them like this to imply a vintage that didn't exist. It was the Lockridge family specialty champagne dreams on a tap water budget. I took a sip. It was acidic and sharp. Perfect. Raina, oh. Look, she actually came. The voice grated on my spine like sandpaper. It was Aunt Carol, my father's sister, flanked by Uncle Bob. They descended on me with the predatory glee of people who needed someone to feel superior to. "Hello, Aunt Carol, Uncle Bob," I said, clutching my glass. "We were just betting on whether you could get the night off." Uncle Bob laughed. A wet, hacking sound. "They keep you working hard at that depot, don't they? I saw a news report about how Amazon workers have to skip bathroom breaks. Is that true? Do you have to pee in a bottle?" "Raina, I don't work for Amazon, Uncle Bob," I said quietly. "And I have plenty of bathroom breaks." "Still moving boxes, though, right?" Aunt Carol asked, tilting her head with exaggerated sympathy. "Your mother says you are a logistics associate. That is a fancy word for stock girl. Isn't it? My neighbor's son does that. He is 19. It is good, honest work, I suppose." "It pays the bills," I said. It was the standard line. It was not a lie. My job did pay the bills. It paid all the bills. It paid for the penthouse I owned in the financial district. It paid for the portfolio of stocks I managed. It paid for the very company that Aunt Carol's husband had just been laid off from, though he didn't know I was on the board that approved the restructuring. "Well, as long as you can make rent," Aunt Carol sighed, looking at my dress with disdain. "Although, with prices these days, I worry about you living in that little apartment. Do you still have that roommate, the one with the cats?" I hadn't had a roommate in 7 years. "It is cozy," I said. "Well, look at Bianca." Uncle Bob gestured grandly toward the staircase. "Now that is success. That girl has the Midas touch. This cosmetic line is going to be global. She told me she is already in talks with Sephora." "Is she?" I asked, keeping my face blank. "Oh yes, millions, Raina, millions. You should learn from her. Maybe she can hire you to, I don't know, pack the shipments? Keep it in the family." I smiled. It was a tight, painful thing. "I will ask her." I excused myself before I said something that would ruin the plan. I drifted to the edge of the room, near the hired string quartet, who looked bored out of their minds. From this vantage point, I could see the mechanics of the charade. I saw the caterer arguing in hushed tones with the event planner near the kitchen door. I saw the investors checking their watches, clearly wondering when they could leave without being rude. And then, I saw my father. Arthur Lockridge was standing in a shadowy corner near the patio doors. He looked smaller than I remembered. His tuxedo was older, the lapels slightly frayed. He was hunched over the catering manager, a woman with a clipboard and a scowl. I moved slightly closer, pretending to admire a painting of a geometric horse, so I could hear. "The card was declined, sir," the woman was saying, her voice icy. "Miss Bianca said to run it again, but I have run it 3 times. Code 51, insufficient funds. We need a check, or we pack up the food now." "No, no, please," my father whispered, his hands shaking as he reached into his inner pocket. "There must be a mistake with the bank. Fraud protection. You know how it is with these big transactions. I will write you a personal check." "It better clear tomorrow morning," the woman warned. "It will, I promise. Just please don't make a scene. Not tonight. It is her big night." I watched my father scribble out a check for what must have been $5,000 or $6,000. I knew that account. It was his retirement savings. It was the emergency fund. It was the money he was supposed to use to fix the leaking roof at their house. And now, it was gone. Sacrificed to the god of Bianca's ego. My heart gave a painful thud. But I did not step in. I could not yet. Saving him now would only prolong the disease. To cure the infection, you have to let the fever break. Grim sight, isn't it? I turned to see Uncle Marcus standing next to me. He was the black sheep of the family, mostly because he refused to play their games. He held a glass of scotch, no ice, no mixer. "Hello, Uncle Marcus," I said, allowing a genuine warmth to seep into my voice. He clinked his glass against mine. "You look dangerous tonight. Raina." "I am just standing here, Uncle." "No." He chuckled softly. "You are standing here like a shark in a swimming pool. Everybody else thinks you are a goldfish. But I see the teeth." He took a sip of his drink and looked over at my father, who was now wiping sweat from his forehead. "He just paid for the food, didn't he?" "And the venue deposit, probably," I added. Marcus shook his head. "They are bleeding him dry. And she," he gestured with his chin toward the center of the room, "is dancing on the corpse of his solvency." At that moment, the music swelled, the lights dimmed, and a spotlight swung to the top of the grand staircase. Bianca appeared. She was undeniable. I had to give her that. My sister knew how to make an entrance. She wore a dress of silver sequins that clung to her body like liquid mercury. Her hair was a cascading waterfall of blonde extensions. She raised her arms as if she were greeting a stadium of adoring fans, not a living room full of hungry relatives and unpaid vendors. "Thank you. Thank you all for coming." Her voice was breathless, practiced. "Tonight isn't just about lipstick or moisturizer. It is about a movement. It is about vibration. When I sat in Bali last year, meditating on the beach, the universe downloaded this vision into me, pure essence, a billion-dollar vision for a billion-dollar consciousness." The room erupted in polite applause. My mother was in the front row, clapping so hard her bracelets jangled like tambourines. She looked at Bianca with a hunger that was terrifying. She didn't just love her. She wanted to be her. Bianca glided down the stairs, hugging people, laughing that fake, tinkling laugh that sounded like coins dropping on a glass table. She worked the room, throwing around buzzwords, synergy, paradigm shift, scalability. She finally made her way to me. "Raina." She pulled me into an air kiss, her cheek barely grazing mine. She smelled of expensive perfume and desperation. "Oh, sweetie, you look comfortable. Is that the dress from the outlet mall I told you about?" "You look stunning, Bianca," I said. "I know, right? It is exhausted being the center of attention, but someone has to carry the torch." She lowered her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "Listen, make sure you don't drink too much. Mom is worried you might get clumsy and knock over one of the displays. These prototypes cost $500 each." "I will be careful," I said. "Where is the product, Bianca?" "I wanted to buy a cream." Her eyes darted away for a fraction of a second. "Oh, we sold out. Can you believe it? Pre-orders. The inventory is completely wiped, but you can invest tonight, and I will put you on the priority list for the second batch." "I see. Attention, attention. Everyone." My mother had taken the microphone. The feedback squealed, making everyone wince. Sylvia stood in the center of the room, beaming, her hand resting possessively on Bianca's shoulder. "If I could have everyone's eyes," Sylvia commanded. "I just want to say a few words as a mother." She paused for effect, tears glistening in her eyes. It was a performance worthy of an Academy Award. "Raising children is not easy," she began. "You plant 2 seeds in the same garden. You water them the same, give them the same sun, but one grows into a magnificent orchid, rare and beautiful." She squeezed Bianca's shoulder. "Bianca, my darling, since you were 4 years old and recited that poem at the preschool talent show, I knew you were destined for greatness. You are a genius, a visionary. You have the fire of the Lockridge ancestors in your veins." Bianca beamed, soaking up the adoration. "And then," Sylvia sighed, her gaze drifting to where I stood in the shadows near the kitchen door. The spotlight did not follow her gaze. I remained in the dark. "Then there is my sweet Raina." The room turned to look at me. 30 pairs of eyes. Pity, amusement, contempt. "Raina," my mother continued, her tone shifting to that of someone describing a slightly slow family pet. "You are the rock, the quiet one. We all know school was difficult for you. We know the world of business and intellect isn't your playground, and that is okay. We need people who are happy to stay in the background. We need people who are content with the simple things, the manual labor, the heavy lifting. You are the dumb one, only in the sense that you don't burden yourself with big dreams. And there is a nobility in that. She raised her glass high. So, to Bianca, our star, who will make us millions, and to Reina, who, well, at least she knows how to organize a shelf to my daughters. To Bianca, the room echoed. They laughed, a ripple of laughter that bounced off the glass walls and settled into my skin. Bianca laughed the loudest, leaning into the microphone. "Aw, thanks, Mom. And thanks, Reina, for showing up. I know the taxi fare was probably a stretch for you this week." More laughter. I stood perfectly still. My face was a mask of polite indifference. Inside, however, the gears were turning, the calculations were complete, the sentimentality was at 0%. I felt the weight of the leather bag on my shoulder. Inside, tucked between a pack of gum and my sunglasses, was a cream-colored envelope. It contained a letter from the board of directors of Novus Logistics, detailing the acquisition of several distressed commercial properties in the Silver Lake area. It also contained my new title. I looked at my mother, flushed with the triumph of her cruelty. I looked at my sister, glowing with the arrogance of the ignorant. I looked at my father, shrinking into his tuxedo. I ran my thumb over the clasp of my bag. Not yet, I told myself. Wait for dessert. I picked up my glass of cheap wine and took a long, slow sip. The taste was bitter, but the aftertaste was going to be incredibly sweet. To understand how I ended up standing in a multi-million-dollar glass cage with a secret weapon in my purse, you have to rewind the tape. You have to go back 20 years, to a house that smelled perpetually of old paper and lemon polish, where the hierarchy was established before I even lost my first tooth. The label dumb was not applied to me all at once. It was a slow accumulation of small sediments, layer by layer, until it hardened into a fossilized truth that my family simply accepted as fact. It started with the letters, to my mother, Sylvia. The English language was a cathedral. She was a high school literature teacher who worshipped at the altar of Shakespeare in Austin. She believed that a person's soul could be measured by their vocabulary and the fluidity with which they could read aloud. For me, words were not a cathedral. They were a swarm of angry bees. I had dyslexia, though in the early 90s in our household, that word was treated with skepticism, like a fad diet or a ghost story. When I looked at a page, the letters did not sit still. The B and the D played a constant game of musical chairs. The sentences would swim and dissolve, reforming into nonsensical patterns. When called upon to read in class, my throat would close up. A physical block rising to meet the mental one. I would stutter. I would skip lines. I would sweat. My mother took this personally. To her. My inability to read Great Expectations fluently at age 8 was not a learning disability. It was an act of rebellion. It was a refusal to participate in the family brand. Contrast this with Bianca. By the time Bianca was 4 years old, she could recite Robert Frost from memory. She didn't just read, she performed. She understood the cadence, the drama, the pause for effect. My mother would sit in her armchair, eyes closed in rapture, as Bianca read sonnets in the living room. When Bianca finished, my mother would clap, her face glowing with the validation that she had produced a prodigy. Then she would turn to me, her face falling into a mask of weary patience, and hand me a primer meant for a toddler. "Just try to sound it out. Reina," she would say, her voice tight. "It is not physics. It is just reading. Everyone does it." Parent-teacher conferences were the biannual festivals of my humiliation. I remember sitting in the hallway on a small plastic chair, staring at the linoleum floor, listening to the muffled voices through the door. Other parents went in and out quickly. My mother was always in there for 40 minutes. When she emerged, she would look exhausted, as if she had just run a marathon while carrying a heavy sack of stones. That sack was me. "I apologized to Mrs. Gable," she would tell me in the car ride home, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. I told her that we are working on it. I told her that you are just a late bloomer. God, Raina, do you know how embarrassing it is to have a literature teacher for a mother and be in the bottom reading group, Mrs.? Gable looked at me with pity. Pity. Raina. She never asked why the letters moved. She never hired a tutor to help with the mechanics of my brain. She simply apologized for my existence and then bought Bianca a new hardcover anthology as a reward for being the antidote to my failure. But here's the thing about the human brain: it compensates. While the letters on the page were dancing the cha-cha, I discovered that the world had a different kind of language, a language of structure, space, and numbers. I saw patterns where others saw chaos. When my father brought home a complicated shelving unit from IKEA that made him curse and throw the instructions across the room, I could look at the pile of screws and particle board and see exactly how they fit together. It was like a 3D blueprint rotating in my mind. I put it together in 20 minutes while he was outside smoking a cigarette to calm his nerves. When I showed them, beaming with pride, my mother didn't see a spatial genius. She saw a child playing with blocks. "Well, at least you are good with your hands," she said, dismissively. "Maybe you can work in a factory one day. They always need people to put caps on toothpaste tubes." They called it fidgeting. They called my obsession with organizing the pantry by expiration date and volume neurotic when I calculated the tip at a restaurant in my head instantly, faster than my father could type it into his calculator. They assumed I had guessed. "Don't guess with money, Raina," my father scolded. "Use the machine." As we grew older, the financial apartheid of the Lockridge house became explicit. Bianca was the artist, the soul, the future. Artists needed inspiration. Inspiration was expensive. Bianca needed to go to drama camp in upstate New York, which cost $2,000 for a summer. Bianca needed a new wardrobe every season because her aesthetic was evolving. Bianca needed painting supplies, dance shoes, and private voice lessons. I, on the other hand, needed to learn the value of $1. "Raina isn't academic," my mother declared when I turned 14. "She needs to learn a trade. She needs to understand labor." So, while Bianca spent her summers painting watercolors by a lake, I was sent to work at Miller's Market, a local grocery store that smelled of bleach and rotting produce. I started as a bagger, then I became a cashier. It was grueling, mindless work, or at least it was supposed to be. But to me, the grocery store was a fascinating ecosystem of data. I memorized the PLU codes for every fruit and vegetable within 2 days. I learned the flow of customers. I realized that if we stocked the milk from the back left instead of the front right, we could save 4 minutes per rotation, which added up to 2 hours of labor per week. The defining moment, the moment I knew I was alone in this world, happened when I was 16. I had been working at the store for 2 years. The owner, Mr. Miller, was a chaotic man who kept his records in a messy pile of notebooks. He was constantly complaining that he was losing money, that inventory was vanishing. Everyone assumed it was theft. I stayed late one night, supposedly to mop the floors. Instead, I took the notebooks, I sat in the back office, surrounded by the hum of the refrigerators, and I laid out the data. I didn't read the words. I read the numbers. The numbers told a story. I saw the pattern immediately. There was a discrepancy in the vendor invoices from the bread supplier. They were charging us for premium delivery surcharges on days when no deliveries were made. It wasn't theft. It was a billing error that had been compounding for 3 years. I did the math on the back of a paper bag. The supplier owed Mr. Miller nearly $12,000. I presented this to Mr. Miller the next day. He was stunned. He audited the accounts, confirmed I was right, and recovered the money. He cried. He actually hugged me and gave me a $500 bonus in cash on the spot. I went home that afternoon, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I finally had proof. I wasn't the dumb one. I was smart. I had solved a puzzle that a grown man couldn't solve. I walked into the kitchen. My mother was chopping vegetables while Bianca sat at the table, weeping dramatically over a C- she had received on a math test. "It is just so unfair," Bianca was wailing. The teacher hates me. Her energy is so toxic, it blocks my chakras. I can't calculate angles when my spirit is being crushed. Shh, baby. It is okay, Sylvia soothed, rubbing Bianca's back. Math is for drones anyway. Your talents are higher. We will get you a tutor. We will fix this. Mom, I said, stepping forward. I clutched the envelope with the $500. I did something today. My mother glanced at me, annoyed at the interruption. Can't you see your sister is in distress? Raina? What is it? I found a mistake in the store's accounting, I said, my voice trembling slightly. I saved Mr. Miller $12,000. He gave me a bonus. I put the cash on the table. The room went silent. Bianca stopped crying instantly, her eyes locking onto the money. My mother wiped her hands on a dish towel and looked from the money to me, and then back to the money. Her face didn't light up with pride. It hardened with suspicion. Raina, she said, her voice dropping an octave. Where did you get that money? I told you, a bonus, for fixing the accounts. Don't lie to me, she snapped. Mr. Miller pays you $7 an hour to scan cans of beans. You expect me to believe that you, my daughter, who barely passed algebra, walked into the office and outsmarted a business owner. You expect me to believe you found a $12,000 mistake. It is the truth, I insisted. It was a vendor error. I saw the pattern. You saw a pattern, Bianca sneered, wiping her dry eyes. Mom, she probably stole it from the register and is making up a story to cover her tracks so you won't be mad. I did not steal it, I screamed. Lower your voice, my mother commanded. She picked up the money as if it were contaminated. I am going to call Mr. Miller right now, and if you stole this, Raina, if you embarrassed this family by being a thief, you will never leave this house again. She marched to the phone. I stood there, paralyzed. I wanted her to call. I wanted her to hear the truth, but she didn't call. She picked up the receiver, dialed 2 numbers, and then hung up. She turned back to me, her face a mask of disappointment. I can't even bring myself to ask him, she said softly. I can't bear to hear him tell me my daughter is a thief. I am going to assume you found this money. Or maybe he gave it to you out of charity because he feels sorry for you, and you concocted this ridiculous genius accountant fantasy to make yourself feel better about Bianca's test score. What? I whispered. No, call him. Please call him. Enough. She slammed her hand on the counter. Take the money. Put it in your savings account. And never, ever lie to me like this again. You are a cashier. Raina, there is no shame in that. But there is shame in pretending to be something you are not. You are not a math whiz. You are not a savior. You are Raina. Just Raina. She turned back to Bianca. Now, darling, let's talk about that tutor. I took the money. I walked to my room. I didn't cry. That was the day the tears stopped. That was the day I realized that truth didn't matter in this house. Only the narrative mattered. And in their narrative, I was the villain, or the fool, and nothing I did would ever change the script. From that day on, I learned the power of silence. Bianca realized quickly that I was the perfect scapegoat. If she broke a vase while practicing an interpretive dance in the living room, she would leave the shards on the floor and tell Mom that clumsy Raina bumped into it. I never denied it. Why bother? The verdict was already in. If Bianca failed a class, it was because I was playing my music too loud and distracting her even though I listened to music on headphones. My father, Arthur, was the silent witness to this execution of my character. He knew. I saw it in his eyes. He knew I hadn't broken the vase. He knew I wasn't stupid. Sometimes, he would find me sitting on the back porch, staring at the stars, and he would slide a crumpled $20 bill into my hand. Buy yourself something nice, he would mutter, refusing to make eye contact. It wasn't a gift. It was a bribe. It was the price of his conscience. He was buying his own peace of mind, paying me to remain the punching bag so he wouldn't have to confront the hurricane that was his wife. I took the money. I added it to the $500. I started a fund. I called it my exit strategy. High school graduation came and went like a sigh of relief. I graduated with a perfectly average GPA. My grades in English and history were abysmal. Pulling down the perfect scores I secretly achieved in advanced calculus, a class I took as an elective without telling my mother. Forging her signature on the permission slip, on graduation day, I wore a beige gown that washed out my complexion. I walked across the stage, and my family offered a polite, muted applause. No air horns, no cheering, just the polite clapping you give to a distant cousin. Later, at the celebratory dinner, which was actually for Bianca, who had won an Artistic Spirit Award despite failing 2 classes, my mother raised a glass. "Well," she said, looking at me with a soft, pitying smile. "You made it, Raina. We were worried for a while there, but you finished. Now you can focus on work. Mr. Miller says you are a very reliable cashier. Maybe in 10 years. You can be a shift supervisor. It is good to have realistic goals." "Yes, Mom," I said. "Realistic goals." I looked at Bianca, who was glowing in a new dress, talking about the prestigious and expensive liberal arts college she would be attending in the fall to study arts administration. "I am going to change the world," Bianca declared. "I know you will," my mother said. I cut into my steak. I didn't say a word. I didn't tell them that I had already applied to the State Polytechnic University for a degree in logistics and supply chain management. I didn't tell them that I had mapped out a 4-year plan to finish in 3. I didn't tell them that the dumb one had just realized that the world runs on logistics, not poetry, and that I was about to own the very roads they drove on. They thought I was finished. They thought the story of Raina Lockridge ended at the checkout counter of Miller's Market. They were wrong. That was just the prologue. The divergence of our fates began not with a bang, but with a bank transfer. When high school ended, Bianca packed 5 suitcases of designer clothes and headed to Preston College, a private liberal arts sanctuary that cost $65,000 a year in tuition alone. Her major was vaguely defined as arts administration, which later shifted to art history. And then, after a semester of waking up before noon proved too difficult, to something called Cultural Interpretations of Modern Dance. I stayed behind. I enrolled in the State Polytechnic University, a concrete block of a school that my mother referred to as the Vocational Center. I didn't correct her. I applied for student loans under my own name, signing the promissory notes at a kitchen table while my parents were busy helping Bianca choose the color scheme for her dorm room. I took a full course load in information technology and logistics, and I worked. I worked like a machine that had been calibrated for endurance. My schedule was a marvel of efficiency, a precursor to the systems I would later build for Fortune 500 companies, from 4 in the morning until 8. I stocked shelves at a big box retailer, from 9 to 3. I attended lectures on algorithms, statistical analysis, and inventory management, from 4 to 10. I worked at a distribution center for a national shipping company, to my family. I was simply grinding away at low-wage labor. When I came home wearing a neon yellow safety vest and steel-toed boots, smelling of cardboard and diesel, my mother would wrinkle her nose. "Make sure you leave those boots in the garage, Raina," she would say, not looking up from her book. "We don't want the smell of the warehouse on the carpet." She saw a laborer. She saw a girl moving boxes. She did not see that I was actually interning in the operations department, learning how a single barcode scan in Ohio triggers a shipping container to move in Singapore. I fell in love with the supply chain. It was not unromantic to me. It was the bloodstream of the world, while Bianca was writing essays on the existential angst of French cinema. I was learning that the world is held together not by philosophy, but by palettes, containers, and code. I discovered that I had a supernatural ability to visualize flow. I could look at a warehouse floor plan and instantly see where the bottlenecks were. It was the same skill that had allowed me to fix Mr. Miller's accounting, but refined, sharpened into a lethal weapon. My professors noticed, Dr. Henderson, a man who rarely smiled, pulled me aside after my sophomore year. "You think in vectors, Lockridge," he told me. "Most people think in straight lines. You see the whole web. Do not waste this." I didn't. I accelerated my studies. I took summer classes. I slept 4 hours a night, and I kept my mouth shut. The first major test of my silence came when I was 22. Bianca graduated barely with a GPA that was borderline probation, and returned home to a hero's welcome. My parents threw a garden party. There were balloons, catered sandwiches, and a banner that read, "Congratulations, Bianca, the world awaits." The irony was that the world was waiting, but it wasn't hiring. Bianca spent the next 6 months on the couch, watching reality television and complaining that the job market was hostile to creatives. She applied for curator positions at museums that required PhDs. She applied for director roles at galleries that required 10 years of experience. When the rejection letters came, or more often, when the silence stretched on, she spiraled. "They are intimidated by me." She would sob into her pillow. "They can tell I have too much vision for an entry-level role." "Of course they are. Darling," my mother would soothe her, glaring at me as I walked through the living room in my work uniform. "The corporate world is stifling. You are a free spirit. You need to create your own path." And so began the era of the startups. First, it was the boutique. Bianca decided she had an eye for fashion. She convinced my father to withdraw $40,000 from his IRA to rent a storefront in a trendy district and stock it with curated vintage finds. The problem was that Bianca's idea of curated was simply things she liked, which were mostly overpriced. Shapeless tunics that looked like potato sacks. The store, named Bee's Knees, opened in October. I visited once. Bianca sat behind the counter, scrolling on her phone, while 3 customers wandered around looking confused by the price tags. "Raina," she chirped when she saw me, "don't touch the silk scarves. Your hands look rough." I didn't touch the scarves. I looked at her ledger, which was open on the counter. I saw the red ink. I saw the rent due dates. I calculated the burn rate in my head. "You need to sell 18 units a day just to break even on the electricity," I said quietly. Bianca laughed. "God, you are such a buzzkill. It is about building a brand. Raina, you wouldn't understand. You move boxes. I move culture." The store closed in February. My father lost the $40,000, plus another $10,000 in lease breakage fees. My mother's reaction, she threw a party. "It is a pivot," Sylvia announced to the guests, pouring wine that was slightly cheaper than the wine served at the graduation party. "Bianca is too big for retail. She learned what she needed to learn. Now she is ready for the next phase." During that party, my mother cornered me in the kitchen. "Raina," she said, her voice low, "your sister is feeling very fragile right now. Her confidence is shaken. We are all pitching in to help her pay off some of the vendor debts so she can start fresh. I expect you to contribute." I stared at her. "Mom, I am paying off my student loans." "I pay rent to you for my room, and you are working all the time," she snapped. "I see you leave at dawn and come back at night. You have no expenses. You don't go out. You don't date. What are you hoarding your money for? Give your sister $200. It is a gesture of faith." I reached into my pocket and pulled out $200. It was money I had set aside for a new laptop battery. I handed it to her. "Thank you," she said, snatching it. "Try to look less miserable about helping family. It is unattractive." I went upstairs to my room and closed the door. I sat on my bed and opened a letter that had arrived that morning. Addressed to me, it was from the university. I had been awarded the Chancellor's Fellowship, a full scholarship for a master's degree in supply chain analytics, tuition, books, and a stipend. I looked at the letter. I looked at the door where my mother had just exited with my cash. I hid the letter under my mattress. I told them nothing. When I started my master's program, I told them I had picked up extra shifts at the warehouse. "Overtime," I said. "Labor shortage." "Good," my father said, not looking up from his newspaper. Hard work keeps you out of trouble. While Bianca launched her next venture, a life coaching business for wealthy teenagers, which involved her charging $100 an hour to tell 16-year-olds to manifest their destiny, I was writing algorithms to optimize last-mile delivery for urban centers. I graduated with my master's at the top of my class. I didn't walk at the ceremony. I didn't buy a gown. I simply had the diploma mailed to a P.O. box I had opened so my mother wouldn't intercept it. 2 weeks later, I was hired by Novus Logistics. Novus was a titan. They moved everything from pharmaceuticals to fighter jet parts. I started as a senior analyst, a position that usually required 5 years of experience, but my portfolio from the university had blown the hiring manager away. My starting salary was $85,000 a year. I came home that night and found the house in chaos. Bianca's life coaching website had been hacked, or so she claimed. In reality, she had forgotten to pay the hosting fee. She was screaming that her brand was being erased. "Raina," she yelled when I walked in, "do you know how to fix a website? You took that computer class at the community college, right?" "I don't know how to fix it, Bianca," I said. "I'm sorry." "Useless," she muttered. I went to my room and signed my offer letter electronically. Over the next 2 years, the gap between my reality and their perception became a canyon. I rose through the ranks at Novus with terrifying speed. I wasn't just good, I was indispensable. When a hurricane shut down the ports in the Gulf Coast, I rerouted our entire southern fleet in 4 hours, saving the company $3 million in perishable goods. I was promoted to team lead, then operations manager. My salary jumped to $120,000, then $150,000. I bought suits, beautiful, tailored suits. I changed into them at the gym down the street from my office and changed back into my shabby clothes before I went home to visit my parents. Bianca, meanwhile, had moved on to her third venture, a YouTube channel dedicated to holistic revenge on toxic energy. She needed professional lighting. She needed a high-end camera. She needed soundproofing for her bedroom. My father took out a second mortgage. I found out about it when I saw the bank statements on the kitchen counter. I confronted him. "Dad," I said, "the interest rate on this is variable. If the market turns, you could lose the house. It is an investment." "Raina," he said, his voice tired. "Bianca says this is the future. Influencers make millions. We just need to give her the runway to take off." "She has had 10 runways. Dad, she has crashed on every single one." "Stop it," he shouted, slamming his hand on the table. It was the first time he had raised his voice at me in years. "You are jealous. You are jealous because you are stuck in a dead-end job moving boxes, and she is chasing a dream. Just because you are content with mediocrity doesn't mean you should drag her down." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had once slipped me $20 out of kindness. That man was gone, eaten alive by the delusion his wife had fed him. "Okay, Dad," I said softly. "I won't say another word." That was the day I decided to move out. I bought a condo in the city. It wasn't a rental. I put 20% down cash I had saved from my low-wage job and my bonuses. It was a beautiful space, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the skyline. It was quiet. It was clean. It was mine. I told my parents I was moving into a shared apartment with a coworker named Sarah. "Sarah works in the packaging department," I lied smoothly. "The rent is cheap because it is a walk-up in a bad neighborhood." "Well, be careful," my mother said, barely looking up from her iPad where she was liking Bianca's latest video, which had 14 views. "Don't expect us to help you with rent. All our resources are tied up in the channel right now." "I know, Mom. I will manage. And don't forget," she added, "Bianca's birthday dinner is next week at Le Monde. It is going to be expensive, so start saving your tips." "I will be there," I said. I moved into my sanctuary, for the first time in my life. I could breathe. I hung my diplomas on the wall of my home office, where no one from my family would ever see them. I bought a bottle of real champagne and drank it while sitting on my velvet sofa, looking out at the city lights. I realized then that I was living two completely distinct lives. In one, I was Reina the director, a woman who commanded respect, who managed budgets larger than the GDP of small nations, who was feared and admired. In the other, I was Reina the dumb one, the struggling warehouse worker who needed to be reminded to wipe her feet. The distance was no longer painful, it was protective. If they knew the truth, if they knew I had the money to save them, to pay off the mortgage, to clear Bianca's debts, they wouldn't be proud. They would be entitled. They would devour me. They would drain me dry until I was just as empty as they were. And then they would blame me for running out of blood. So I kept the secret. I polished it. I guarded it. I went to Bianca's birthday dinner. I wore a dress from Target. I listened to Bianca brag about a sponsorship deal that was actually just a discount code for herbal tea. I listened to my mother make passive-aggressive comments about my rough hands when the bill came, and my father's hand shook as he reached for his wallet. Bianca looked at me. "Reina," she said, "can you cover the tip, unless you need it for rent or whatever?" I looked at the bill. The dinner had cost $400. "Sure, Bianca," I said. I put down a $20 bill. "That is all," she scoffed. "God, you are cheap." "It is 10%, I said. "That is all I can afford." I watched them judge me. I watched them feel superior. And for the first time, I smiled a genuine smile. Because I knew something they didn't. I knew that the power in the room didn't belong to the person with the loudest voice. It belonged to the person who could walk away and never look back. But I didn't walk away yet. I stayed. I watched. And I waited for the inevitable crash that I knew was coming, the crash that not even my father's second mortgage could prevent, at Novus Logistics. I was not known as Reina Lockridge, the girl who struggled to read aloud in the second grade. I was known simply as the Fixer. My office was on the 42nd floor, a glass fortress that hummed with the quiet, expensive sound of climate control and high-speed data servers. My job title was officially Senior Operations Manager. But in practice, I was the person they called when the world broke, when a strike in the port of Marseille threatened to delay a shipment of insulin to the Midwest. I was the one who woke up the regional vice president of a rail line at 3 a.m. to negotiate an alternative route. When a supplier in Shenzhen tried to substitute inferior microchips into a guidance system order, I was the one who caught the discrepancy in the subcode and froze their assets before the cargo even left the dock. I was ruthless. I had to be. In logistics, empathy is an inefficiency. If you feel bad for the trucking company that is behind schedule, you lose the contract. If you hesitate, the supply chain snaps. My colleagues, mostly men 10 years my senior, learned quickly that I did not engage in water cooler gossip. I did not talk about my weekend. I came in. I optimized the workflow. I cut the dead weight, and I went home. I managed a team of 150 people spread across 3 continents. I fired people with the same clinical detachment with which I ordered lunch. "Your metrics are down by 12% for 2 consecutive quarters," I would say, sliding a severance package across the desk. "This is not a negotiation. Goodbye." It was intoxicating. For the first time in my life, I was in control. The variables obeyed me. But while I was building an empire of efficiency, the Lockridge family was drowning in chaos. Bianca's life had become a series of expensive legal disasters. The life coaching business ended not with a whimper, but with a lawsuit. Apparently, telling a teenager to stop taking her medication and start trusting the universe was considered practicing medicine without a license. The parents sued. Then came the eviction. Bianca had leased a studio apartment in a trendy district to launch her art career, but she had neglected to read the clause about noise violations. After 3 consecutive nights of what she called primal scream therapy sessions, the landlord served her papers to cover the legal fees and the settlements. My mother did the unthinkable. She sold the plot of land in Oregon that my grandparents had left to the family. It was supposed to be the legacy, the safety net for their old age. "We are liquefying assets to reinvest in high-yield opportunities," Sylvia told Aunt Carol over the phone, her voice strained but haughty. Land is so stagnant. Bianca has a new project involving cryptocurrency. It is very cutting edge. It was a lie. The money was gone before the check even cleared. Swallowed by lawyers and credit card companies, I watched all of this from a distance. I checked the public records. I saw the sale deed. I felt a pang of sorrow for my grandfather, who had loved that land. But I said nothing. I could have written a check to save it. I could have hired the best defense attorney in the state for Bianca. But I didn't. They didn't want my help. They wanted my subservience. Thanksgiving that year was a masterclass in absurdity. I could have driven my new Audi A7, a sleek gray shark of a car that I had bought with my annual performance bonus. Instead, I parked it in my building's garage and rented a beige Ford Focus with a stain on the passenger seat. I wore a sweater I had bought at a discount store 5 years ago. I arrived at the house to find the mood somber. The turkey was dry. The wine was boxed. Bianca was wearing a new diamond necklace fake, or perhaps bought on a credit card that hadn't maxed out yet, and talking loudly about her resilience. Great geniuses are always persecuted, she declared. Stabbing a potato. Look at Galileo. Look at Steve Jobs. The lawsuit is just the universe testing my resolve. Exactly, my mother nodded, pouring more gravy to hide the dryness of the meat. You are a warrior, Bianca. Then, my phone buzzed. It was the red line. That was what we called the emergency frequency at Novus. I looked at the screen. It was the director of European operations. A freighter carrying $80 million worth of automotive parts had just been detained in Turkey due to a customs paperwork error. Every hour it sat there cost the client $50,000. I stood up. I have to take this. It is work. On Thanksgiving. My father sighed. Can't they let you eat in peace? It is urgent, I said. I walked to the hallway, but the acoustics in the house were terrible. They could hear me. I answered the phone, my voice dropping into my fixer register cold, sharp, commanding. What is the status of the manifest? I demanded, skipping the pleasantries. No, I don't care what the customs officer said. The harmonized system code is correct. It is a Class 4 non-hazardous material. Tell him if he doesn't release the hold in 20 minutes. I am calling the trade attaché, and we are filing a formal complaint for obstruction. Yes, I am serious. Do it. Now. I hung up and returned to the table. My heart was beating steadily. I had just threatened a government official and saved a contract that was worth more than this entire neighborhood. My family was staring at me. Oh, Raina, my mother said, shaking her head. Was that your shift supervisor? Something like that, I said, picking up my fork. You really shouldn't talk back to them like that, Bianca said, looking at me with faux concern. I heard you yelling. You sounded desperate. Are you in trouble? Did you mess up an order? I was handling a situation, I said. You sounded like you were begging, Aunt Carol chimed in. I heard you say, release the hold. Were they holding your paycheck? Oh, honey, if you are in that much trouble, maybe you should just quit. Is it worth the stress for $12 an hour? I looked at them. They genuinely thought I was arguing with a warehouse foreman about a pallet of toilet paper. I am fine, I said. Pass the cranberries. Back at Novus, the real war was beginning. His name was Sterling Vance. He was the newly hired director of strategy. A man with a shiny MBA, a jawline that could cut glass, and the competence of a damp sponge. He was the kind of corporate predator who survived by consuming the work of others. Sterling had targeted me from day one. He saw a quiet woman who did the heavy lifting, and he decided I was his ladder. We were working on Project Atlas, a massive restructuring of our trans-Pacific shipping routes. It was my baby. I had spent 6 months analyzing fuel consumption data, weather patterns, and port congestion statistics. I had built a model that would save the company $14 million annually. 2 days before the presentation to the board of directors, Sterling called me into his office. Raina, he said, flashing a blinding white smile. I'll take the lead on the presentation this Friday. You have done some good grunt work, but the board needs to see the big picture. I will refine your data and present it. You don't need to attend. It might be over your head. The model is complex, Sterling, I said calmly. If they have questions about the algorithms, you won't know how to answer. I think I can handle a few spreadsheets. He laughed dismissively. Send me the files, final versions, clean ones, with no watermarks. I sent him the files. On Friday, I did not stay at my desk. I walked into the boardroom 5 minutes after the meeting started. Sterling was at the head of the table, projecting my slides. He had removed my name from the title page. He was taking credit for every pivot table, every projection. As you can see, Sterling was saying, gesturing expansively, I have identified a critical inefficiency in the Singapore hub. I stood at the back of the room. The CEO, Mr. Henderson, the same man who had once been my professor's colleague, looked up and saw me. Mrs. Lockridge, the CEO said, Mr. Vance tells us this is his initiative. Do you have something to add? Sterling paled. Sir, Raina is just the analyst who formatted the slides. She doesn't need to be here. I walked forward. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I plugged my laptop into the secondary HDMI port. Actually, I said, my voice steady, Mr. Vance is presenting the simulation I ran 3 weeks ago. It is a good simulation, but it has a flaw. It assumes fuel prices will remain static. I hit a key. The screen split. This, I pointed to my screen, is the live model. It adjusts for the current spike in crude oil prices. If we go with Mr. Vance's static model, we lose $2 million by Q3. If we go with my dynamic model, we save an additional 4%. I looked at Sterling. He was sweating. Also, I added, if you check the metadata of the file Mr. Vance is presenting, you will see the author is listed as R. Lockridge and the creation date is last month. The only thing Mr. Vance modified was the title page. He did that this morning at 9:15. The silence in the room was absolute. Thank you, Ms. Lockridge, the CEO said quietly. Sterling, please pack your things. Sterling was escorted out of the building by security an hour later. I took his office. That victory didn't just give me a promotion. It made me a legend. The industry started to whisper about the woman at Novus who ate directors for breakfast. Headhunters began calling my personal cell phone. I was offered the position of chief operating officer for a mid-sized logistics firm in Chicago. The salary was $300,000. I turned it down. I am worth more, I told the recruiter. You are tough, he laughed. Okay, what about Apex Global? They are looking for a director of global operations. It is the big leagues. Raina, based in New York and Los Angeles. Base salary is $450,000, plus stock options. Set up the meeting, I said, while I was negotiating a package that included a signing bonus larger than my father's entire pension fund. Bianca announced her engagement. She posted a photo on Instagram. Her hand, clutching a glass of champagne, featured a ring that looked suspiciously cloudy. The caption read, I said yes. To the love of my life, the visionary, the crypto king, Julian. I looked up Julian. It took me 3 minutes to find his digital footprint. He wasn't a crypto king. He was a mid-level recruiter for a multi-level marketing scheme that sold quantum-charged water filters. He had a history of 3 failed businesses and a suspended driver's license. He was perfect for Bianca. I went home for the engagement party. Julian was there, wearing a suit that was too shiny and talking about passive income streams to my father. Mr. Lockridge, Julian was saying, leaning in close. The fiat currency system is collapsing. You need to put your equity into digital assets. I can get you in on the ground floor of Watercoin. It is going to moon. My father looked mesmerized. Really? You think so? The land sale money is just sitting in the bank. I felt a flash of anger. Hot and sharp. I stepped in. Julian, I said, interrupting. What is the market cap of Watercoin, And is it registered with the SEC? Julian blinked, looking at me with the disdain one reserves for the uninitiated. Raina, right? The stock girl. Listen, babe, this is high-level finance. It is decentralized. The SEC is a dinosaur. Right, I said. And does the quantum filter actually filter heavy metals, or does it just spin the water around? You are being negative. Raina, Bianca shrieked, rushing to Julian's side. Why can't you just be happy for me? Julian is going to take care of us. He is a millionaire. On paper or in cash? I asked. Stop it, my mother hissed, grabbing my arm, her nails digging into my skin. Don't you dare ruin this. Your sister has finally found someone who matches her ambition. If you are jealous because you are alone and bitter, keep it to yourself. I looked at Julian, who was smirking. I looked at my father, who was about to hand over the last of his money to a con artist. I pulled my arm away from my mother. I am not jealous, I said quietly. I just know how to read a balance sheet. I left early. As I drove away in my rental car, I made a call to the recruiter. I will take the interview with Apex Global, I said, but tell them I don't just want the director title. I want a seat on the strategy board. That is a big ask, Raina. I am a big player, I said. Get it done. I hung up. The invisible years were over. I was done hiding in the shadows of warehouses and boardrooms. It was time to step into the light. And if the light blinded my family, so be it. The interview was scheduled for the same day as Bianca's brand launch party. The timing was poetic. Fate, it seemed, finally had a sense of humor. The collapse of the House of Lockridge did not happen in slow motion. It happened with the violent, abrupt speed of a guillotine blade dropping. 3 weeks after the engagement party, Julian vanished. He didn't just leave. He evaporated. One morning, Bianca woke up in the luxury apartment they had leased using a forged proof of income letter to find the closet empty, the safe drilled open, and a note on the kitchen counter that simply said, "The market is volatile. Sorry." He had taken the money from the Oregon land sale. He had taken the second mortgage funds my father had invested. He had even maxed out 3 credit cards he had opened in Bianca's name. The water coin he had sold them was not a cryptocurrency. It was a website registered in the Cayman Islands that now displayed a 404 error page. Bianca returned home in a U-Haul truck she couldn't afford to pay for, dragging her boxes back into the bedroom she had occupied as a teenager. The house, once a shrine to her potential, now felt like a mausoleum. The air was thick with the smell of stale coffee and panic. I received a text from my mother on a Tuesday afternoon while I was reviewing the quarterly logistics forecast for the entire North American sector. Emergency family meeting, tonight, 7 p.m. Do not be late. This is life or death. I considered ignoring it. I had a dinner meeting with a vendor from Seoul, but curiosity, or perhaps a morbid desire to see the wreckage, compelled me. I rescheduled the dinner and drove my rental car to the house. When I walked in, the living room was dimly lit. My father sat in his armchair, looking like a man who had been hollowed out from the inside. Bianca was curled up on the sofa, sobbing into a tissue, wearing a silk robe that was probably one of the few things Julian hadn't pawned. My mother paced the floor, a stack of papers in her hand. "Sit down, Raina," Sylvia commanded, not even looking at me. "We have a crisis." I sat on the edge of a wooden chair. "I heard about Julian. I am sorry." "Sorry. Don't pay the creditors," Bianca wailed, lifting her head. Her makeup was smeared, making her look like a tragic clown. "He stole my youth, Raina. He stole my light. And he left me with $60,000 in credit card debt. It is actually $82,000 if you count the interest," my mother corrected sharply, looking at a spreadsheet. "Plus the lease breakage fee, plus the car payments." She slammed the papers down on the coffee table. "We are bleeding," Sylvia announced. "Your father's accounts are frozen because of the mortgage investigation. I have sold everything I can sell, but we need immediate liquidity to stop the bank from seizing the car Bianca uses. We need a bridge loan. She pushed a document toward me. It was a loan application from a predatory lender, the kind that charges 25% interest and operates out of strip malls. We need a co-signer, Sylvia said. Your father can't do it because his credit score just tanked. I can't do it because my name is on the mortgage. Bianca obviously can't. She looked at me expectantly. You want me to sign this? I asked, picking up the paper. It was for a personal loan of $15,000. It is just a formality, my mother said quickly, waving her hand. We know your credit isn't stellar. I mean, you work in a warehouse, you rent a room, you probably have student loans, but the loan officer said that having a co-signer with steady employment, even low-income employment, is better than nothing. It shows stability. I stared at the paper. They thought my credit was bad. In reality, my credit score was 830. If I signed this, I wouldn't just be helping them get a loan. I would be liable for the entire amount when they inevitably defaulted. And with an interest rate of 25%, it was financial suicide. No, I said. The word hung in the air like a gunshot. Bianca stopped crying. My father looked up. My mother froze. Excuse me? Sylvia whispered. I said no. I will not sign this. I cannot afford to take on your debt. You selfish little brat, Sylvia exploded. Her face turned a mottled shade of red. How dare you? After everything we have done for you, we put a roof over your head. We fed you. I pay rent for my room. Mom, I buy my own food. I have since I was 16. That is irrelevant, she screamed. This is family. Your sister is in crisis. She was defrauded by a criminal. She is a victim. She is 34 years old, I said calmly. She signed the papers. She spent the money. She was manipulated. Sylvia pointed a shaking finger at me. You don't understand because you are cold inside. You have always been cold. You are like a machine. Bianca is an artist. She feels things deeply. She trusted too much because her soul is pure. And you sit there with your steady little paycheck, your safe little life, and you refuse to help. You are the lucky one, Raina. I blinked. I am the lucky one. Yes, she hissed. You are lucky that you are simple. You are lucky that you don't have big dreams that can be crushed. You are lucky that you are content moving boxes and punching a clock. You will never know the pain of flying close to the sun and burning your wings like Bianca. The least you can do, the absolute least, is use your mediocre stability to help the sister who actually has a destiny. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. It was a masterpiece of gaslighting. In her mind, my success, which she viewed as mediocrity, was an accident of my stupidity, while Bianca's failure was a tragic consequence of her genius. I looked at my father. Dad, do you agree with this? Arthur Lockridge shifted in his chair. He looked at his wife, then at Bianca, and finally at me. For a second, I saw a flicker of the man he used to be. Sylvia, he mumbled, his voice cracking. Maybe we shouldn't ask her. It is a high interest rate. If Bianca doesn't pay... Shut up, Arthur, Sylvia snapped. Unless you have a hidden stash of gold bars, be quiet. We are doing this. She turned back to me, her eyes narrowing. Actually, Raina, we tried to spare you the trouble. My stomach tightened. What do you mean? I tried to put the utility bills in your name last week, she confessed. Not with shame, but with annoyance. Just to free up some cash flow, but the electric company said there was a freeze on your social security number. Why would you freeze your credit, Raina? Do you have something to hide? Or are you just paranoid? I felt the blood drain from my face, replaced by a cold, hard rage. They hadn't just asked, they had tried to steal my identity. If I hadn't subscribed to an identity protection service 3 years ago, a precaution I took specifically because I worked in data security, they would have ruined me without me even knowing. You tried to open accounts in my name without my consent, I asked, my voice deadly quiet. That is a felony. Mother, that is fraud. Oh, stop using big words, she scoffed. It is not fraud if it is family. We were going to pay the bills, mostly. Bianca just needed a few months. You are unbelievable. I stood up. I am leaving. If you walk out that door, Bianca screamed, jumping up from the couch. Don't ever come back. You are jealous. That is what this is. You are jealous because I am beautiful and talented and Julian loved me even if he was a crook. He loved me. And you are just a sad, lonely spinster who counts boxes for a living. Bianca, tell everyone, Sylvia shouted as I walked to the door. Tell the aunts. Tell the cousins. Let everyone know that Raina Lockridge let her family starve because she wanted to save her pennies for what comic books. I opened the door. The cool night air hit my face. I am locking my credit permanently, I said, not looking back. If you try to use my name again, I will file a police report, and I won't just call the cops. I will prosecute. I slammed the door on their screaming. I drove for an hour, aimlessly, until my hands stopped shaking. I wasn't shaking from fear. I was shaking from the adrenaline of restraint. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drive that rental car through the front window of their house, but I didn't. I was the fixer. I didn't create messes. I cleaned them up. And I had just realized that the only way to clean up this mess was to incinerate it. The next morning, I was sitting in a boardroom on the 55th floor of a skyscraper in Manhattan. I had flown out on the red-eye, changing from my jeans into a $3,000 suit in the airport lounge. Across the table sat the CEO of Apex Global and their head of HR. Ms. Lockridge, the CEO said, leaning forward. We have been following your career at Novus for some time. The way you handled the Suez blockage was artistic. It was necessary, I said smoothly. We want you, he said. Novus is a good company, but they are conservative. Apex is aggressive. We are expanding into the drone delivery sector in sub-Saharan Africa. We need someone who understands infrastructure where there is no infrastructure. We need a director of global operations who isn't afraid of chaos. He slid a leather folder across the mahogany table. I opened it. The numbers were staggering. Base salary, $450,000. Performance bonus, up to 50% of base. Stock options, 50,000 shares. Vesting over 4 years. Signing bonus, $100,000. Paid immediately upon signature. It was more money than my father had made in his entire life. It was more money than the debt Bianca had racked up. It was freedom, absolute, unassailable freedom. There is one condition, I said. Looking up from the contract. Name it, the CEO said. I want full autonomy over the restructuring of the North American distribution hubs. And I want a seat on the acquisition committee. I know you are looking to buy out smaller logistics firms in the tri-state area. I want to vote on who we buy and who we crush. The CEO smiled. It was a shark's smile, recognizing another shark. Done. I picked up the heavy, gold-plated pen. As the ink flowed onto the paper, signing Raina Lockridge, I felt a physical shift in my chest. The girl who stuttered over reading assignments was dead. The girl who stocked shelves at Miller's Market was a ghost. I was no longer the daughter of Sylvia and Arthur. I was the director. I walked out of the Apex building into the blinding sunlight of New York City. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from my mother. Raina, we are having a launch party for Bianca's new organic cosmetics line next week. It is at a rental in Silver Lake. We managed to scrape together some funds from a payday loan because we believe in her. You need to come. And bring cash. We are doing a friends and family investment round. Don't embarrass us by showing up empty-handed. This is your chance to redeem yourself for the other night. I stared at the screen. The audacity was so pure it was almost admirable. They had taken a payday loan probably at 400% interest to throw a party for a fake business. And they were summoning me to pay for it. I typed a reply, then deleted it. No, a text was too easy. A text was too impersonal. I remembered the scene in my head. The rented mansion, the fake wine, the sneering relatives, the speech my mother would give. I checked my bank account on my phone. The signing bonus from Apex had already been wire transferred. $100,000. I smiled. It was a cold, terrifying smile. I would go to the party. I would wear my best dress. I would bring the letter from Apex. And I would bring the truth. It was time to show them exactly what the dumb one was capable of. I hailed a taxi. "Take me to the airport," I told the driver. "I have a party to attend." The envelope arrived via a private courier service at 8 in the morning. It was heavy, made of cream-colored cardstock with a texture that whispered of old money and exclusive memberships. The logo of Apex Global was embossed in gold leaf in the upper left corner. I sat at my kitchen island, a cup of black coffee steaming beside me, and slid the letter opener under the wax seal. "Dear Ms. Lockridge," it began. "We are pleased to confirm your appointment as Director of Global Operations." I skipped the pleasantries and went straight to the compensation package. Seeing the numbers on a screen was one thing. Seeing them printed in ink was another. Base salary, $450,000 per year. Signing bonus, $100,000. Wired yesterday. Stock options vesting schedule 50,000 shares. I ran the math in my head. In 1 month, I would earn what my father used to earn in 4 years at the height of his career. In 1 year, I would earn what my mother pretended our family was worth. They thought I was making $18 an hour. They thought I was scraping by on overtime pay and discount coupons. The gap between their perception and my reality was no longer just a canyon. It was a different planetary system. I folded the letter and placed it carefully into my purse. This piece of paper was not just a contract, it was a loaded gun, and I intended to fire it tonight. But a good general does not go into battle with just one weapon. I needed intelligence. I needed to know the terrain. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I had saved under consultant. It was actually a private investigator named Miller, a former forensic accountant who I had used previously to vet potential vendors for Novus. He was expensive, discreet, and terrifyingly thorough. "Miller," I said when he answered, "I need a full financial autopsy on 3 subjects. Arthur Lockridge, Sylvia Lockridge, and Bianca Lockridge. I need property records, credit scores, outstanding debts, and any active liens, and I need it by 4 this afternoon." "That is a tight window, Raina," Miller rumbled. "It will cost you double." "Bill me," I said. While Miller dug into the digital skeletons of my family, I went to prepare my armor. In the world of high-stakes business, clothes are not just fabric, they are a language. My mother and Bianca spoke the language of the nouveau riche loud logos, shiny fabrics, trends that screamed, "Look at me." I spoke a different dialect. I went to a boutique in Soho that didn't have a sign out front. The sales associate knew me by name. I selected a dress by a Japanese avant-garde designer. It was black, with an asymmetrical hem and a high neckline. To the uneducated eye, it looked like a shapeless sack of cotton. To someone who knew, it was a masterpiece of structural engineering that cost $3,200. "It is severe," the associate noted as I looked in the mirror. "Very commanding." "That is the point," I said. "I am not going there to be admired. I am going there to preside." I bought the dress. I bought shoes that looked simple, but were handmade Italian leather. I bought a handbag that cost more than Bianca's car. At 4:15, my email pinged. Miller had delivered. I opened the PDF file and scrolled through the data. I had expected it to be bad. I had not expected it to be catastrophic. The family home, the house I grew up in, the house my father had spent 30 years paying off, was gone. Or rather, it belonged to the bank. My parents had taken out a second mortgage 3 years ago to fund Bianca's life coaching business. Then, 6 months ago, they had refinanced that mortgage into a high-risk adjustable-rate loan to pay for her legal fees. The equity was wiped out. They were underwater by $80,000. If they missed 2 more payments, foreclosure proceedings would begin. I kept scrolling. Bianca's credit score was 420. She had 12 credit cards in default, but the real shock was a small, almost easy-to-miss detail in the section regarding her ex-fiancé, Julian. Miller had included a background check on Julian as part of the liability assessment. I looked at the photo of Julian, the slicked back hair, the weak chin. I recognized him. I frowned, searching my memory, not from the engagement party, from before. I opened my laptop and logged into the archived recruiting database of Novus Logistics. I typed in Julian Thorne. There it was, 2 years ago. Julian had applied for a junior sales associate position at Novus. I had been the hiring manager for that round. I pulled up his interview notes. Candidate lacks fundamental understanding of supply chain economics. I had written, overconfident, tried to use buzzwords to mask incompetence. Recommended for rejection, do not interview again. I laughed out loud in my empty apartment. It was a cold, sharp sound. The man who had scammed my sister out of her future. The genius businessman my mother had fawned over was a man I had rejected for an entry-level job in 10 minutes. I had seen through him instantly. My family, the so-called intellectuals, had handed him the keys to the kingdom. It was perfect. The irony was so delicious I could taste it. I printed the files, the mortgage documents, the foreclosure warnings, the rejection letter for Julian. Next, I called my lawyer. I need to draft a document, I told him. A formal declaration of financial non-responsibility. I want it clearly stated that I am not liable for any debts incurred by my family members, past, present, or future. And I want to set up a trust for myself that makes my assets untouchable by any familial claims in civil court. Are you expecting a lawsuit? He asked. I am expecting an implosion, I said. I want to make sure I am behind blast-proof glass when it happens. By 6 p.m, I was ready. I stood in front of my full-length mirror. The black dress swallowed the light. My hair was pulled back into a tight chignon. I wore no jewelry except for a simple watch. I looked like a judge. I picked up the phone and dialed one last number. Uncle Marcus, I said. Raina. His voice sounded surprised. I thought you weren't coming tonight. Sylvia said you were too embarrassed to show your face after the loan incident. I am coming, I said. And I need you to do something for me. What is it? I need you to be there early. Get a seat near the front. And when things start to get interesting, I need you to watch. Don't intervene. Don't try to stop it. Just watch. Raina, you sound different, he said slowly. You sound dangerous. I am tired. Uncle Marcus, and tonight, everyone is going to wake up. I will be there, he promised. I always liked a good show. I hung up. I placed the Apex appointment letter, the dossier from Miller, and the rejection email regarding Julian into my handbag. I checked the clasp. It clicked shut with a satisfying sound. I walked down to the lobby of my building. The doorman, who knew me as the quiet woman in 5B, tipped his hat. Heading out for a special occasion, Ms. Lockridge. You could say that. Henry, I said. I am going to a funeral. Oh, I am so sorry, he said, his face falling. I didn't know. Don't be, I said. The deceased doesn't know they are dead yet. I stepped out onto the sidewalk. The city air was crisp. I signaled for a rideshare. I didn't take a town car. I didn't take a limousine. I needed to arrive exactly as they expected me to arrive, humble, transportable, invisible. A battered sedan pulled up. It was gray, with a dent in the rear bumper. The driver was a young man listening to a podcast about conspiracy theories. Going to Silver Lake? He asked. Yes, I said, sliding into the back seat. The car smelled faintly of pine air freshener and old cigarettes. It was the smell of my past. It was the smell of the dumb one. As the car merged onto the highway, watching the city lights blur past, I felt a strange sense of calm settling over me. For 20 years, I had dreaded these gatherings. I had dreaded the questions, the sneers, the comparisons. I had shrunk myself to fit into the tiny box they had built for me. But tonight, the box was going to break. I ran my hand over the leather of my bag. I wasn't going to Silver Lake to save them. I wasn't going there to pay their debts or fix their mistakes. I was going there to deliver the news. The news that the bank was coming for their house. The news that their genius daughter was bankrupt. The news that their dumb daughter was the most powerful person in the room. The driver glanced at me in the rearview mirror. "You look intense, lady," he said. "Bad day." I looked back at him, and my eyes were dry and clear. "No," I said softly. "It is actually going to be a very good day. It is payday." The car turned off the highway and began the climb up the winding hills of Silver Lake. I could see the houses perched on the cliffs, glowing like jewels. Somewhere up there, in a rented mansion with unpaid catering. My mother was holding a microphone, ready to tell the world how wonderful Bianca was. I leaned back and closed my eyes. Wait for dessert, I thought. Just wait for dessert. The air in the living room had grown heavy, thick with the scent of dying flowers and desperation. It was a physical weight, pressing down on the white leather furniture and the rented crystal glassware. I stepped back into the fray, my heels clicking softly on the polished concrete floor. A sound that was swallowed by the murmur of 30 guests who were trying very hard to pretend they were having a good time. I had returned to the scene of the crime. My mother, Sylvia, was in her element, or at least the element she desperately wished was hers. She was holding court near the fake fireplace, her champagne glass dangerously tilted. When she saw me enter, her eyes didn't light up with warmth. They narrowed with utility. To her, I wasn't a daughter returning from a journey. I was a prop that had briefly gone missing. "Raina!" she called out, her voice pitching up into that shrill, faux cheerful register she used when she wanted to command without appearing to order. "Thank goodness you are back. We are running low on ice." She gestured vaguely toward the kitchen with her free hand, the diamond bracelet likely cubic zirconia catching the light. "The caterers seem to have vanished," she laughed, a nervous, brittle sound. "Good help is so hard to find these days. Be a dear and run to the kitchen to fill the bucket. You know where everything is. You are used to serving, aren't you? It keeps you busy." The room chuckled. It was a low, polite ripple of amusement. Raina the server, Raina the worker, Raina the help. I looked at her. I looked at the empty silver bucket sitting on the bar. A younger version of me would have felt the sting of shame, the hot flush creeping up my neck. I would have scurried to the kitchen, grateful for a task that allowed me to hide. But the woman standing in the black Japanese dress did not scurry. "Of course, Mother," I said. My voice was smooth, cool, and utterly devoid of subservience. I walked to the bar, not to get the ice, but to place my handbag down. I set it on the marble counter with deliberate care. The heavy clasp made a solid thud against the stone. Inside that bag lay the nuclear option, sleeping quietly next to my sunglasses. "So, you are the sister." I turned. A man was leaning against the wall, swirling his wineglass with an affectation of boredom. He was wearing a suit that was too tight in the shoulders and loafers without socks. I recognized him from Bianca's Instagram stories. Jason. He was an influencer agent, which in Los Angeles usually meant he was unemployed and living off a trust fund that was slowly dwindling. "I am Raina," I said. "Right, Raina," he smirked, looking me up and down. His eyes lingered on my dress, confused by its lack of cleavage or sequins. "Bianca talks about you. She says you work in, logistics." "That is correct." He laughed. A short, sharp bark. "Logistics. That is a fancy word for warehouse work, right? Like driving those little forklifts? Or do you just stand there and put stickers on boxes all day? Beep, beep, beep." He mimicked the sound of a scanner, grinning at his own wit. A few people nearby tittered. I looked at him. I looked at his cheap watch, his anxious posture, the way his eyes darted around the room seeking validation. "I manage movement, Jason," I said. "Movement." He raised an eyebrow. "Like moving boxes." "Like moving economies," I said softly. "I ensure that when you click a button on your phone to buy your hair gel, it arrives before you forget you ordered it. I manage the flow of capital, goods, and data across borders that you didn't even know existed. But yes, sometimes there are boxes involved. He blinked. The answer was too complex, too confident for the box he had put me in. He recovered quickly, retreating into arrogance. Right. Well, cool. Must be nice to have a job where you don't have to think too much. I mean, Bianca is under so much pressure. Creative genius takes a toll. You wouldn't understand the mental load. I am sure I wouldn't, I said, taking a sip of my wine. Suddenly, the lights dimmed. A spotlight, operated by a cousin I barely recognized, swung onto the center of the room. Bianca stood there. She had changed her outfit. She was now wearing a white pantsuit that I suspected was intended to make her look like a serious CEO, but instead made her look like a televangelist. "Friends, family, visionaries," Bianca shouted, throwing her arms wide. Her voice was amplified by the microphone, echoing slightly in the cavernous room. "We have eaten, we have drunk, we have celebrated the vibe, but now we must talk about the future," she signaled to the cousin, who clicked a remote. A projector screen descended from the ceiling, displaying a PowerPoint slide. The text was in a curly, unreadable font, "Pure Essence, the Revolution of Face." "The beauty industry is broken," Bianca declared, pacing back and forth. "It is toxic, it is male-dominated, it lacks soul. My vision is to change that. I have spent the last 6 months developing a formula that isn't just a cream. It is an affirmation. It is liquid confidence." She paused for applause. There was none. A few people coughed. "But," she continued, her voice trembling slightly, "revolutions aren't free. Creating magic costs money. The banks, they don't get it. They look at spreadsheets. They don't look at auras." My father, standing in the back, looked down at his shoes. He knew exactly what the spreadsheet said. "That is why," Bianca said, ramping up the energy, "I am opening this room up to a very exclusive opportunity. Tonight, and tonight only, I am allowing my inner circle, that is you guys, to become angel investors in Pure Essence. We are looking for a seed round of $50,000. Who wants to be on the ground floor of the next Estee Lauder?" Silence, absolute, crushing silence. The guests shifted in their uncomfortable chairs. They stared at their drinks. They stared at the floor. These people were freeloaders, sycophants, and distant relatives who had come for the free food. They didn't have $50,000. Some of them probably didn't have $50. Bianca's smile began to falter. Her eyes darted around the room, panic rising behind the false eyelashes. "Anyone?" she asked, her voice higher now. "Uncle Bob." "You said you loved the concept." Uncle Bob suddenly found a fascinating scratch on his shoe. "Well, you know, Bianca, the market is tight right now." Aunt Carol. "Oh, sweetie, we just redid the kitchen." Aunt Carol lied. The humiliation was palpable. It was a slow-motion car crash. Bianca was standing there, hand out, begging, and nobody was biting. Then, my mother stepped in. Sylvia couldn't stand to see her golden child fail. She grabbed the microphone from Bianca, her face flushed with a mixture of anger and determination. "What Bianca is trying to say," Sylvia said, her voice hard, "is that this is a test of loyalty. Family supports family. We don't just eat the food and drink the wine and leave. We build together." Her eyes scanned the room, looking for a victim, looking for a wallet. Her gaze landed on me. I was standing by the bar, still as a statue. "Raina," Sylvia said. The name cut through the room. Everyone turned, 30 pairs of eyes fixed on me. "Raina," my mother repeated, stepping closer. "You are standing there so quietly. You haven't said a word all night. You have just been observing." "I am listening." "Mother," I said. "Good. Then listen to this. Your sister needs help, real help, not thoughts and prayers." She gestured at me with the microphone. "We all know you work hard. You are always at that warehouse, doing overtime, saving your pennies. You live like a nun. You don't have a husband. You don't have children. You don't have expenses. I saw where this was going, it was a shakedown, a public mugging. I think, Sylvia said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, that it would be a beautiful gesture if you kicked off this investment round. You have savings, don't you? From all those double shifts? I have savings, I admitted. Wonderful. She beamed. Then why don't you put down, let's say, $5,000? It is a drop in the bucket for the business, but it shows faith. Be the first one, Raina. Show everyone that you believe in your sister. $5,000. To the Raina they knew, that was 6 months of rent. That was blood money, earned hour by grueling hour. Come on, Raina, Bianca chimed in, seeing a lifeline. Do it for the family. You will get shares when we go public. You will be rich. Well, richer than you are now. Jason snickered from the corner. Yeah, invest in the future. Warehouse girl. I looked at Bianca. I looked at Sylvia. I felt the weight of the Apex letter in my bag. I could write a check for $50,000 right now and not even notice it was gone. I could fund this entire farce 10 times over. But that wasn't the plan. No, I said. The word was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the room. Sylvia's smile froze. Excuse me? I said no, I repeated, my voice steady. I will not invest $5,000. I will not invest $1. Why not? Sylvia demanded, the microphone amplifying her outrage. You have the money, I know you do. I saw your bank statement 2 years ago. My money is spoken for. Mother, I said, it has a purpose. The room was deadly silent now. This wasn't just a refusal. It was an insurrection. The dumb one was fighting back. Sylvia's face turned a violent shade of purple. The veins in her neck stood out. Spoken for, she screeched. Spoken for by what? What could you possibly need money for that is more important than your sister's career? What are you buying? Raina, more comic books. Video games. Are you saving up for a trip to Disney World? Yeah, Bianca laughed. A cruel, mocking sound. Maybe she is saving up to buy a personality, or maybe she's afraid that if she gives me the money, she won't be able to afford her cat food when she retires. Don't be selfish. Raina, Sylvia yelled. It is pathetic. You hoard your little paycheck like a dragon sitting on a pile of pennies. While your sister is trying to change the world, you are small. You have always been small. She is just scared. Mom, Bianca added, leaning into the mic. She has limited capacity. She doesn't understand investment. She thinks money is just for paying rent and hiding under the mattress. It is sad. Really, the dumb one stays dumb. The insults rained down. Selfish, small, pathetic, dumb. And then, it happened. A laugh bubbled up in my throat. It wasn't a giggle. It wasn't a nervous titter. It was a deep, resonant, genuine laugh. It started in my chest and rolled out into the room. Ha 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 ha! I laughed. I laughed at the absurdity. I laughed at the irony. I laughed at the absolute, monumental ignorance of the people standing before me. The room froze. My laughter was not the reaction of a victim. It was the reaction of a predator who had just watched the prey walk into the trap. Why is she laughing? Aunt Carol whispered, sounding genuinely frightened. Raina, stop it, my mother commanded. You are making a scene. Are you having a breakdown? I stopped laughing. I took a deep breath. The amusement vanished from my face, replaced by a cold, Arctic calm. I walked over to the table where the investors were supposed to sign up. I held my wine glass, the glass filled with the $2 wine that they pretended was vintage. I raised the glass, looking at the liquid. You call me small, I said softly. You call me dumb. You think I hoard pennies. I let the glass drop. It didn't fall by accident. I slammed it down onto the table. Crash. The sound was explosive. Shards of glass flew across the white tablecloth. Red wine splattered like blood onto the pristine, pure essence brochures. The guests jumped. Bianca screamed. My mother gasped. Taking a step back. I didn't blink. I didn't look at the broken glass. I looked straight into my mother's eyes. Okay, I said, my voice ringing with a power they had never heard before. You want to know what I use my money for. You want to know where the warehouse girl puts her cash. I reached for my bag. I undid the clasp. Let me show you. The silence that followed the shattering of the wine glass was absolute. It was the kind of silence usually reserved for the seconds after a bomb detonates, before the screaming starts. The red wine dripped off the edge of the table, staining the white carpet in a spreading pool of crimson, but no one moved to clean it up. My mother's mouth was open, a perfect O of shock. Bianca was clutching her microphone like a lifeline. I did not look at them. My eyes were fixed on the bag. I reached inside. The guests leaned forward, a collective inhale of breath sweeping through the room. They were expecting a checkbook. They were expecting a wad of crumpled bills. Perhaps the savings I had scraped together from my overtime shifts. They were expecting the dumb one to capitulate, to buy her way back into the family's good graces with a pitiful offering. Instead, I pulled out the envelope. It was cream-colored, thick, and textured. The gold-embossed logo of Apex Global caught the light of the chandelier. I held it for a moment, letting the weight of it settle in my hand. It felt heavier than paper. It felt like a verdict. I tossed it onto the table. It didn't flutter. It landed with a solid slap, sliding across the wine-stained tablecloth until it came to rest directly in front of Jason. Jason, the influencer agent who had just mocked me for driving a forklift. Jason, who was currently swirling his cheap wine and looking at me with a mixture of confusion and disdain. "Pick it up," I said. My voice was not loud, but it carried a frequency of command that I usually reserved for boardroom negotiations. It was the voice that made union leaders sit down and listen. Jason blinked. "What is this, a grocery list?" "Pick it up, Jason," I repeated. "And read it. You seem to have a lot of opinions about my career. Let's see if you have the literacy skills to understand it." He hesitated, looking at Bianca for cues. But Bianca was paralyzed. He set his glass down and picked up the envelope. He pulled out the letter. He unfolded it. I watched his eyes. I watched them scan the header. I watched the smirk vanish from his face, replaced by a sudden, pale slackness. I watched his throat work as he swallowed. "Well," I said, crossing my arms. "Don't keep the investors waiting. What does it say? Read the title. Out loud." Jason cleared his throat. His hands were shaking slightly. "It says Director of Global Operations." A ripple of murmurs went through the room. "Keep reading," I commanded. "Who is the employer?" "Apex Global," Jason whispered. "Louder," I said. "Apex Global," Jason said, his voice cracking. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with a new kind of fear. "Holy, this is Apex Global. They own everything." "And the compensation?" I asked. "Skip the stock options. Just read the base salary." Jason looked at the number. He looked at me. He looked back at the number. $450,000, he stammered. "Per year." The silence returned. But this time it was different. It wasn't the silence of shock. It was the silence of a vacuum. The air had been sucked out of the room. $450,000. It was a number that didn't make sense in this room. It was more than the combined annual income of almost everyone present. It was an astronomical figure to people who were currently debating whether to invest $5,000 in a non-existent cosmetic line. "That is impossible." My mother lunged forward. She snatched the letter from Jason's hand, nearly tearing it. "Give me that." She held the paper up to her face. Squinting aggressively, she scanned it, her eyes darting back and forth like a trapped animal. "This is fake," she declared, looking up with a desperate, frantic smile. She turned to the crowd. "It is a prank. You know Raina. She has a weird sense of humor. She probably printed this at the copy shop. Apex Global, please. She works at a warehouse. She scans boxes. This is just a sad attempt to look important because she is jealous of Bianca." She threw the letter back onto the table with a scoff. Nice try, Raina. But fraud is a serious crime. You shouldn't play with things you don't understand. I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I simply reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. Uncle Marcus, I said. Marcus was sitting in the front row, holding a glass of scotch. He looked like he was watching the Super Bowl. Yes, Raina, he asked, leaning back. You worked in banking for 30 years before you retired, I said. You know what a verified banking app looks like, right? You know the difference between a screenshot and a live session. I certainly do. I walked over to him. I unlocked my phone and opened the Chase Private Client app. I tapped the screen to refresh the balance. The little circle spun for a second, and then the numbers settled. I held the screen in front of Marcus's face. Tell them what you see, Uncle Marcus, I said. Read the available balance line. Marcus adjusted his glasses. He leaned in. He looked at the screen. Then he looked at me. Then he looked at the screen again. He let out a low, appreciative whistle. Well, I'll be damned, Marcus chuckled. $112,450.16. He looked over at Sylvia, who was now trembling. That is a live balance, Sylvia, Marcus said, his voice cheerful. I just saw it refresh, and judging by the transaction code wire transfer, Apex Global signing bonus, I would say that letter is about as real as a heart attack. That is enough cash to buy this house outright. Assuming the bank hasn't already foreclosed on it, the room erupted. What? 100,000? Raina, the warehouse girl. Bianca dropped the microphone. It hit the floor with a deafening screech of feedback, but nobody cared. She stared at me, her face draining of all color until she looked like a wax doll left in the sun. No, Bianca whispered. No, that is not possible. You are the dumb one. You are the slow one. Mom said you can barely read. I turned to face my sister. I stood tall in my $3,000 dress, the invisible armor I had worn all night finally gleaming in the spotlight. I am not dumb. Bianca, I said. My voice was calm, but it was the calm of a hurricane eye. I have never been dumb. I just didn't speak your language. I didn't speak the language of pretension. I didn't speak the language of begging. I spoke the language of results. But the warehouse, she stammered. I run the warehouse, I corrected her. And the shipping lanes, and the international procurement strategy. While you were manifesting success, I was building it. While you were playing dress-up with Mom's credit cards, I was negotiating contracts that keep this country running. You lied to us. Sylvia shrieked. She pointed a shaking finger at me. You deceived your own family. You let us think you were poor. You let us think you were struggling. Why? To humiliate us. I didn't lie, I said coldly. I told you I worked in logistics. You heard box mover. I told you I managed movement. You heard delivery driver. You heard what you wanted to hear because it fit the narrative you wrote for me when I was 6 years old. You needed me to be the failure so Bianca could be the star. You needed a background character to make the protagonist shine. I took a step closer to my mother. Well, the background character just bought the studio. You are cruel, Sylvia spat. Tears streaming down her face, angry, frustrated tears. You are a cold, heartless bitch. Your sister is drowning in debt, and you are standing there flashing your money like a gangster if you have all this money. Why didn't you help her? Why did you let her suffer? Suffering? I asked. You call living in a rented mansion suffering. You call throwing parties you can't afford suffering. I turned back to the table and picked up the dossier Miller had sent me. I opened it. Let's talk about suffering, I said. Let's talk about reality, because you all seem to be allergic to it. I looked at the crowd of investors. You want to invest in pure essence, I asked them. Let me tell you what you are actually investing in. I pulled out a sheet of paper. Bianca Lockridge, I read aloud. Current debt obligations. Chase Sapphire Reserve $18,422. Status 90 days past due. Bianca let out a strangled cry. Stop it. Don't listen to her. I didn't stop. I turned the page. American Express Platinum $12,600. Status in collections. Discover card $9,000. Status charged off. Raina, please, my father begged from the back of the room. Don't do this. I looked at him. I have to. Dad, you wouldn't stop it, so I have to. I turned to the next page. And let's not forget the crown jewel, I said, looking at my mother. The mortgage, the house you all think is the seat of the Lockridge legacy. Don't you dare, Sylvia whispered. Second mortgage taken out 3 years ago, $150,000. I read. Refinanced 6 months ago into an adjustable rate subprime loan. Current balance $185,000. Arrears 3 months. Notice of default filed by Wells Fargo on the 14th of this month. I looked up at the room. They don't own their home, I announced clearly. The bank owns it, and in 30 days, the bank is going to take it back. This party, this champagne. It is all paid for by a payday loan with an APR of 400%. There is no business. There is no product. There is only debt. The guests were backing away. They were looking at Bianca and Sylvia not with admiration, but with horror. They looked like they were afraid the debt was contagious. I am leaving, someone muttered. Me too. This is insane. I can't believe they tried to ask us for money. Bianca sank to the floor, her white pantsuit puddling around her. She buried her face in her hands and began to sob ugly, heaving sobs of total humiliation. Sylvia looked around the room, watching her social standing disintegrate in real time. She watched the neighbors turning their backs. She watched the wealthy friends checking their watches. She turned back to me. Her face changed. The anger vanished, replaced by a terrifying, desperate calculation. She lunged forward and grabbed my hands. Her grip was wet and clammy. Raina, she cried, her voice pitching into a hysterical plea. Raina, baby, listen to me. Okay, you made your point. You are successful. You are brilliant. We see it now. We were wrong, we admit it. She squeezed my hands, looking up at me with wide, pleading eyes. But this is good news. This is a miracle. You have the money. You can fix this. You can write a check right now and make the bank go away. You can pay off Bianca's cards. You can save us. She looked around the room, trying to rally support. She can save us, Sylvia shouted to the retreating guests. My daughter is rich. She is a director. She is going to take care of everything because she is a good girl. She loves her family. She looked back at me, smiling through her tears. Right, Raina. We are family. Blood is thicker than water. You wouldn't let your sister go to jail. You wouldn't let your parents be homeless. You are going to help us, because we are family. I looked down at her hands clutching mine. I remembered the hands that had slapped me when I couldn't read. I remembered the hands that had taken my bonus money from the grocery store. I remembered the hands that had signed a loan application in my name without my consent. I pulled my hands away. I did it slowly, deliberately, as if I were peeling off a dirty bandage. I stepped back, creating a physical distance between us that felt like miles. Family, I asked. The word hung in the air, cold and sharp. I looked at Bianca, weeping on the floor. I looked at my father, cowering in the shadows. I looked at my mother, her hands still reaching out for a wallet she felt entitled to. You treated me like a servant for 20 years, I said. You mocked me. You stole from me. You tried to ruin my credit. You laughed when I was humiliated. I picked up my bag. I picked up the letter. You didn't want a daughter, I said. You wanted a staff member. You wanted a scapegoat. I looked my mother dead in the eye. So tell me, Sylvia, do you usually call the waitress family after she drops the check? Family. I repeated the word, tasting the bitterness of it. You treat the staff better than you treat me. At least you pay the staff. My mother's hands were still suspended in the air, grasping at the phantom hope of my checkbook. She blinked, her brain unable to process the rejection. But the office, she stammered, pivoting to a new angle of desperation. Bianca's office downtown the headquarters. We just need to pay the back rent so she doesn't lose the address. It gives the brand legitimacy. If you won't pay the house mortgage, at least pay the office rent. It is a business expense. You understand business." I almost admired her tenacity. It was the tenacity of a cockroach scuttling through a nuclear winter. "Ah, yes," I said, a slow, cold smile spreading across my face. "The headquarters, Suite 404 in the Skyline Tower, a prestigious address." "Exactly," Sylvia nodded eagerly. "See, you know it. It is a prime location." "I know it very well," I said. I reached into my bag again. This time, I didn't pull out a letter. I pulled out a set of keys. They were heavy, magnetic key cards attached to a sleek metal fob. "I know it," I continued, my voice dropping to a conversational volume that somehow sounded louder than a shout. "Because as part of my signing package with Apex Global, and utilizing the stock options I liquidated from my previous position at Novus, I made a personal real estate investment last week." I held up the keys. "I bought the Skyline Tower." The room spun. I could practically see the vertigo hitting Bianca where she sat on the floor. "You what?" Bianca whispered. "I bought the building," I said simply. "It was a distressed asset. The previous management company was inefficient. I saw value in the logistics of the location, so I acquired it." I took a step toward my sister. "And guess what I found when I audited the tenant rolls yesterday? A virtual office lease for Pure Essence LLC in Suite 404, a lease that is 6 months in arrears." Bianca's face went from pale to a sickly shade of gray. "You haven't paid rent since you opened the office." "Bianca," I said, "you owe the building management, which is now me, $12,000 in back rent and late fees." "Reina, wait." Bianca scrambled backward, her heels scraping against the floor. "I can explain. The funding was coming, Julian said." "Julian is gone," I cut her off. "And as the new owner, I have a zero-tolerance policy for delinquent tenants. It is bad for the bottom line." I looked down at her with the dispassionate gaze of an executioner. "Consider this your official verbal notice. Your lease is terminated, effective immediately. You have 24 hours to remove any personal property from the virtual mail slot before I have the contents shredded." "You can't do that," Bianca screamed. It was a primal, animalistic sound. She scrambled to her feet, her face twisted into a mask of pure hate. "You bitch. You jealous, ugly bitch. You are trying to destroy me." She lunged. It happened fast. Bianca threw herself at me, her fingernails hooked like talons, aiming for my face. She wanted to scratch the success right off my skin, but she never reached me. Uncle Marcus stepped in. He moved with surprising speed for a man of 60. He caught Bianca by the arms and held her back. She thrashed against him, screaming obscenities, kicking her legs in the air like a tantruming toddler. "That is enough. Bianca," Marcus barked, his voice stern. "Stop it. Have some dignity, for God's sake. She is ruining my life," Bianca wailed, collapsing into his arms. "Make her stop. Make her give me the building." I didn't flinch. I didn't move. I stood perfectly still, watching the spectacle. Behind me, the sound of shuffling feet grew louder. The guests, the investors, the distant cousins, the friends of friends were fleeing. They were grabbing their purses and jackets, avoiding eye contact with my mother, scurrying toward the door like rats abandoning a sinking ship. "I have to go," Jason muttered, edging past me. "Left my stove on." "Wait," Sylvia cried out, running after them. "Don't go. It is just a misunderstanding. We are just having a passionate family debate. The investment opportunity is still open." But nobody stopped. They muttered apologies and pushed out the front door, their whispers drifting back into the room. Total fraud. "Did you hear? The sister owns the building?" I knew Bianca was a flake, but this Reina is terrifying. Remind me never to cross her. The room emptied until only the core cast remained, me, Marcus, Sylvia, Arthur, and the sobbing heap that was Bianca, my father. Arthur stood by the window. He looked aged. He looked at me, and for the first time in 20 years, There was no pity in his eyes. There was shame, deep, burning shame. He couldn't hold my gaze. He looked down at his hands, the hands that had signed the checks for Bianca's failures, the hands that had failed to protect me. "Arthur!" Sylvia shouted, turning on him. "Do something. Your daughter is evicting your other daughter. Talk to her." Arthur shook his head slowly. "She owns the building. Sylvia, what do you want me to say?" "Command her," Sylvia shrieked. "You are her father." "I haven't been her father in a long time," Arthur whispered. Sylvia let out a sound of frustration and turned back to me. She wiped her face, trying to compose herself, trying to find one last lever to pull. "Fine," she said, her voice shaking. "Fine. You want to play hardball with the office. We will find another office, a better one, but you are not walking out of here without settling the bill for tonight." She gestured to the half-eaten food, the open wine bottles. "This party cost $8,000, she said. "The caterers are waiting to be paid. The rental company needs the check for the furniture. We don't have it. You know we don't have it. If you walk out that door, you are leaving your mother to deal with the police." I looked at her. "The police?" "Yes," she said triumphantly. "If we can't pay, it is theft of services. Do you want to see your mother arrested? Is that what you want? To see me in handcuffs?" I tilted my head. Actually, that process might have already started. "What?" "I saw a van outside when I arrived," I said calmly. "Le Petit Jardin Catering, and I saw 2 police cruisers pulling up the driveway as the guests were leaving. Apparently, the credit card on file, the one in Bianca's name, was flagged as stolen." "Stolen?" Bianca gasped, looking up. "I used Julian's card number. He left it on a piece of paper. He owed me." "That is called credit card fraud." "Bianca," I said, "and since the amount is over $950, it is a felony." Panic, real and visceral, exploded in the room. "Oh my God!" Sylvia hyperventilated, clutching her chest. "Oh my God! They are outside. They are coming in." "I imagine they are just waiting for the guests to clear out," I said, checking my watch. "You probably have about 2 minutes before they knock." "Reina." Sylvia threw herself at my feet. She actually knelt. It was a grotesque parody of motherhood. "Reina, please, you have to pay them. Just this once. I swear. I will never ask you for anything again. Just pay the caterer so they don't arrest your sister. She can't go to jail. She is too fragile." "Please, Reina," my father added, his voice cracking. "I beg you." I looked down at them, the mighty Sylvia, on her knees, the genius Bianca, a sobbing criminal, the patriarch Arthur, a broken man. I reached for my purse. The room went silent. Hope, desperate and pathetic, flared in Sylvia's eyes. She thought she had won. She thought that, in the end, the guilt would work. She thought the good daughter programming was too deep to be overwritten. "Thank you," she sobbed, reaching out her hand. "Thank you, baby. I knew you loved us." I opened my purse. I reached inside. I didn't pull out my checkbook. I didn't pull out my black Amex card. I pulled out a small rectangular piece of cardstock, freshly printed. The ink was barely dry. I dropped it into my mother's open hand. It was my new business card. Reina Lockridge, Director of Global Operations, Apex Global. "What is this?" Sylvia stared at it, confused. "My attorney's contact information is on the back," I said. I zipped my bag shut. "If you decide to sue me for filial neglect or whatever nonsense you threaten me with, send the paperwork there. He charges $600 an hour, and he eats people like you for lunch." "But the bill!" Sylvia screamed, scrambling up. "The police." "The bill is not in my name," I said. "The contract is not in my name. The fraud was not committed by me." I turned toward the door. "Reina," Bianca shrieked. "You can't leave us. We are family." I stopped. I didn't turn around. "Send the bill to Julian," I said over my shoulder. "Or better yet, manifest the money. I hear the universe provides." I walked out the front door. As I stepped onto the porch, the red and blue lights of the police cruisers were flashing against the manicured hedges of the rental property. A caterer was talking angrily to an officer, pointing at the house. "That is the sister," the caterer said, pointing at me. The officer looked at me. "Ma'am, are you involved with the event organization?" I stopped. I looked at the officer. I looked back at the house, where the sounds of screaming and crying were leaking out into the night air. "No, officer," I said calmly. "I was just a guest. The organizers are inside. I believe they were just discussing how to resolve the payment issue." "Thank you, ma'am," he nodded. "Have a good night?" "I will," I said. I walked past the police cars. I walked past the catering van. I walked down the long driveway to the street where my rideshare was waiting. Behind me, the front door opened, and I heard my mother's voice, shrill and panicked, trying to explain to the police that it was all a big misunderstanding. I heard Bianca crying. I heard the crumbling of a facade that had stood for 30 years. I didn't look back, not once. I opened the car door and slid into the back seat. "Where to?" the driver asked. "Downtown," I said. "To the Skyline Tower. I have some new property to inspect." The heavy oak door of the rental mansion clicked shut behind me, sealing the chaos inside. I stood on the porch for a moment, letting the cold night air of Silver Lake wash over me. It was crisp and smelled of jasmine and exhaust fumes, a uniquely Los Angeles perfume. Behind me, the muffled sounds of my mother pleading with a police officer and my sister sobbing were still audible, but they sounded distant, like a radio playing in another room. They were no longer my noise. They were no longer my burden. I walked down the driveway, my heels clicking a steady rhythm on the pavement. I did not run. I did not rush. I walked with the measured pace of a woman who had nowhere to be but exactly where she wanted to be. My phone began to buzz in my hand. It was a violent, angry vibration. I looked down at the screen. A photo of my mother, smiling fake sweetly at a garden party from 3 years ago, flashed on the display. "Incoming call, mother." I let it ring. It stopped, then started again immediately. "Incoming call, Bianca." I stopped under the glow of a street lamp. The light cast long shadows across the pavement. I looked at the names flashing on the screen. For 32 years, those names had dictated my emotional weather. A call from Sylvia meant criticism. A call from Bianca meant a demand. I had been Pavlov's dog, trained to flinch, to apologize, to serve. I slid my thumb across the screen, but not to answer. I opened the contact settings. I scrolled down to the bottom of the menu. There it was, the digital guillotine. "Block this caller." I pressed it. A dialog box popped up asking me to confirm. I didn't hesitate. I didn't feel a pang of guilt. I felt a sudden, physical expansion in my chest, as if a corset I had been wearing since childhood had just been cut open. "Confirm." I did the same for Bianca. "Confirm." The phone went silent. The buzzing stopped. The link was severed. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs until they ached pleasantly. I felt lighter. It wasn't just a metaphor. I actually felt as though gravity had loosened its grip on me. The dumb one, the slow one, the servant. Those versions of Raina Lockridge were dissolving into the night air, leaving only the director. I got into the waiting car. "You okay?" the driver asked, glancing at me in the rearview mirror. "You look like you just walked out of a war zone." "I did," I said, leaning my head back against the seat. "But I won." I directed him not to my apartment, but to a place I had walked past 100 times but never dared to enter. It was a wine bar on the rooftop of a hotel downtown, a place where a single glass cost more than my weekly grocery budget used to be when I arrived. The hostess looked at my dress, the $3,000 architectural masterpiece, and didn't ask if I had a reservation. She simply led me to the best seat on the terrace, overlooking the sprawling grid of the city. "What can I get you?" the waiter asked. "A glass of the 1996 Cabernet," I said. "The Reserve." He raised an eyebrow in appreciation. "An excellent choice." When the wine arrived, it was deep and dark, swirling in the crystal glass like liquid garnet. I took a sip. It didn't taste like the vinegar my mother served. It tasted like blackberries, leather, and smoke. It tasted like success. My phone chimed with a single text message. It wasn't from the blocked numbers. It was from Uncle Marcus. "You did well, kid. Don't look back. The show is over." And you were the only one who knew the lines. I smiled. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Marcus knew. I sat there for an hour, watching the red and white streams of traffic flowing on the freeway below. I thought about revenge. In the movies, revenge is loud. It is screaming matches and court cases and dramatic confrontations. But as I sat there, wrapped in the silence of my own autonomy, I realized that true revenge is quiet. I hadn't harmed them. I hadn't slashed their tires or burned down their house. I had simply stepped out of the way. For decades, I had been the mattress they fell on. I was the one who fixed the accounting errors, the one who paid the small bills, the one who absorbed the insults so they could feel superior. I was the buffer between them and the hard, cold ground of reality. Tonight, I had removed the mattress. Gravity would do the rest. 1 month later, my office at Apex Global was on the 55th floor. It was a corner suite with floor-to-ceiling glass walls that offered a panoramic view of the harbor. My desk was a slab of reclaimed teak that was larger than my bed used to be. The quiet hum of the office was broken only by the sound of my pen scratching across a contract. I was authorizing the acquisition of a logistics fleet in South America, a deal worth $12 million. My assistant, a sharp young man named David who had a degree from Harvard and treated me with terrifying reverence, knocked on the open door. "Ms. Lockridge," he said, "your 2 o'clock is here, the private investigator regarding the personal matter." "Send him in, David," I said, capping my pen. Miller walked in. He looked out of place in the pristine corporate environment, wearing a rumpled trench coat and carrying a manila folder. He sat down opposite me and placed the folder on the teak desk. "You asked for an update," Miller said. I did. "It is done," Miller said. "The foreclosure was finalized on Tuesday. The bank didn't waste any time. The sheriff's department executed the eviction notice yesterday morning." I nodded, my face impassive. "And the occupants?" "They are out," Miller said. "Your parents moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in East Los Angeles. It is a walk-up, 2nd floor. The neighborhood is colorful, safe enough during the day, but I wouldn't park a Lexus there at night." "They don't have a Lexus anymore," I noted. "Repo took it last week." "Right," Miller flipped a page. "Your father has taken a job as a greeter at a hardware store, minimum wage. He looks tired. Raina? But he is working." I felt a small twinge in my chest, but I suppressed it. Arthur Lockridge was an able-bodied man who had spent 30 years letting his wife spend money they didn't have. Work would be good for him. Reality would be good for him. And my mother, "She is trying to start a blog," Miller said, a hint of amusement in his voice. "Something about surviving betrayal and spiritual poverty. It has 3 subscribers. She spends most of her time complaining to the landlord about the water pressure." "And Bianca," Miller paused. He looked at me, gauging my reaction. "Bianca is working," he said. "Where?" "At a diner on Wilshire. The Galaxy Diner. You know, the one open 24 hours. I knew it. It was a place where the pancakes were greasy and the coffee was burnt. "She is a server," Miller said. "The manager says she is not very good. She drops things. She complains about her feet, but she shows up. Apparently, she has a lot of debt to service. The court ordered garnishment of her wages for the credit card fraud settlement." I turned my chair toward the window. The irony was so sharp it almost drew blood. Bianca, the genius, the artist, the girl who was too good for labor, was now doing the exact job she had mocked me for. She was refilling ketchup bottles. She was wiping tables. She was serving people who didn't look at her, who didn't care about her vision, who just wanted their eggs. She was finally learning the lesson I had learned at 14. She was learning that the world owes you nothing. "Do you want me to send them anything?" Miller asked quietly. An anonymous care package. A check. I watched a container ship slowly making its way out of the harbor, heading for the open ocean. It was carrying thousands of tons of cargo, moving steadily, efficiently, without drama. No, I said. Nothing. If I send them money, I said, turning back to face him. I interrupt the lesson. If I save them now, they will never learn how to swim. They will just wait for the next life raft. Let them swim. Miller. Miller nodded, closing the folder. You are a hard woman. Raina. I am a fair woman, I corrected. Send the bill to David. He will see that it is paid today. Miller left. I was alone again in my glass tower. I picked up the next file on my desk. It wasn't a business contract. It was a proposal from the Community Outreach Department. Project Literacy, a grant proposal for early intervention in dyslexia. I opened the file. It was a program designed to provide tutors, specialized software, and support systems for children in low-income school districts who were struggling with reading, children who were being called slow, children who were being told to sit in the back of the class, children who were smart and capable and terrified. I looked at the budget request. It was for $50,000. I remembered the look on Mrs. Gable's face when I couldn't read the word cat. I remembered the shame burning in my gut. I remembered my mother's apology for my existence. I took my pen. I crossed out 50,000. I wrote 250,000. I signed my name at the bottom, Raina Lockridge, Director. I stood up and walked to the window. The sun was setting, painting the city in shades of gold and violet. The lights of the skyscrapers were flickering on. One by one, a constellation of human ambition. Somewhere down there, in the grid of the city, Bianca was pouring coffee for a stranger. Somewhere down there, my mother was sitting in a small apartment, wondering where it all went wrong. I didn't hate them anymore. Hate is an attachment. Hate is a cord that binds you to the person you hate. I had cut the cord. I felt nothing but a distant, quiet pity, like looking at a faded photograph of people I used to know. I pressed my hand against the cool glass of the window. I could see my reflection. I didn't see a victim. I didn't see a scapegoat. I saw a woman who had built herself from the scraps they had thrown away. They used to call me the dumb one in that house. But out here in the world, my name is etched on the glass, and that is the only answer I ever needed to give. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It has been a journey, and I hope you found some satisfaction in Raina's victory. Please let me know in the comments where you are tuning in from. I would love to connect and hear your thoughts on how Raina handled her family. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to the channel Sunday Drama Stories, like the video, and show your support by hitting the hype button so this story can be heard by more people. Your support means the world. Stay strong and keep writing your own story.